You know, I'm pretty happy that I am not living in the New Testament times. Way back thousands of years ago, when they were trying to figure out how to stay healthy, how to keep each other safe, so to speak. And I know this much. I would much sooner be wearing a mask in this culture to try and keep people safe than to do what they had to do to keep people safe. You know, the New Testament era was a very tumultuous period of time when people had to figure out how to live in community. In fact, when God gave the Jewish community, it's not just the Ten Commandments, but all the other regulations. They had what were called the purity laws. Because back then, if somebody got sick with some kind of contagion, just like that, an entire town could be infected and lost. And in fact, we even know now in some of the developing countries, if it wasn't from first world care coming in to try and stop the spread of things like Ebola and other horrendously devastating diseases, entire villages and maybe even entire countries would be devastated. And so we have a means now to sort of take care of things, but back then, the Jewish people were actually given clear directions about two aspects where you needed to take extra measures to make sure your contagion, so to speak, wasn't able to be passed on to somebody else. And you can read about them in the Old Testament, in Leviticus and in Numbers, but in summary, there were two primary ones. One, if you touched a corpse, a dead body, if you were involved in any of its care or any of its transportation or movement, anything, if you touched it, you had to, after, wash yourself, wash your hands at least, you had to wash yourself, you had to wash your clothes, and you had to quarantine for a designated number of days, depending upon what the issue is. And that was similar with things like molds and other things, leprous things that people weren't really sure about, and so people were isolated. The other one was if, as a woman, during your menstrual cycle, or if you had any other blood discharge. The same thing was you would have to wash yourself, you would have to wash your clothes, and you would have to quarantine yourself for whatever period of time. In protecting society, they didn't have one of these. What they had was this: unclean, unclean, unclean. And those who were considered unclean would be mandated to let everyone know that they were unclean. And the socialized isolation and the blatant disregard for those people, they were for sure in a desperate, forsaken, and isolated place. We usually know of it in terms of lepers as well, who also would have to cry out, unclean, unclean. And so, quite frankly, I'm happy with this. In contrast to another way to keep their communities clean. So what does this all have to do with Luke chapter 8, verses 40 to 56? In Luke chapter 8, a very significant ruler of the Jewish synagogue in Capernaum by the name of Jairus comes to Jesus because his daughter is near death. And he puts aside all of the other social norms and comfortable sort of behaviors and actually will hurry himself into Jesus' presence and ask him to come and heal his daughter. It's sort of like daddy's little girl. She's 12, just at the age where she would transition into what would be considered a young woman, maybe marriageable age. And so he's really worried because he knows she's on her deathbed. And so he comes, doesn't have to worry about the unclean yet, but he comes to Jesus desperate, and Jesus says to him, she will live. And so they get ready and they start to head over to Jairus' home. But along the way, this lady who should have been saying, unclean, unclean, sort of sneaks in through the crowd, gets up close, touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and believing that if she just touched the hem, she would be healed. And she is. And Jesus stops the crowd and goes, my powers flowed out of me. Who touched me? And the disciples, I think, are going, are you kidding me? Look at the crowd. Who touched you? She broke the protocol to try and find life. I want to be careful that we don't take too much from the story and sort of try to apply it here. She made a decision knowing that Jesus was the source of her help. But for Jairus, it's like, are you kidding me? Jesus now has been touched by this hemorrhaging woman, and now he's unclean. And he's going to ask this unclean rabbi that he's not really sure about to come to his home to try and rescue his daughter. But along the way, one of the Jairus buddies comes up and says, don't bother the teacher anymore, your daughter is dead. And then Jesus has these profound words, and he basically says to her, she is not dead. Believe, and she will live. Believe, and she will be well. I sometimes wonder about the interruptions in our lives, these distractions that come along, and prompt us to wonder, is Jesus going to show up too late for my miracle, or for your miracle? And for Jairus at that point, Jesus is showing up way too late. But they still make the journey to the house. There's people mocking and laughing when Jesus says she's only asleep, because they know what dead looks like. And so he clears the room, and he goes to the little girl and says, arise. Arise. And she comes back to life. And so here's the thing. Oftentimes, other people's willingness to believe is found in the fact that you have. And just like a coach who believes for an athlete until the athlete can believe for themselves, sometimes our belief needs to be demonstrated in such a way that others would come to believe it as well. Take a watch of the video on Jairus' daughter that we've posted as well, and hopefully, as you think about the freedoms that we have to care for each other, that you would be able to find a sense of willingness to do what you need to do to provide hope for others and to keep them safe. Because I don't want to be running around unclean, unclean. But I do want to run around offering the hope that Jesus has. God bless you. Have a great day.